Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Cover 2 podcast. I'm your guy, Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And for those of you who aren't actually watching the video, Nick is completely decked out in red today. We will get into that in just a moment as to why. He's got everything Arizona Cardinals imaginable. The coffee mug, the hat, the shirt, the jerseys. And I'm pretty sure that's even a toolbox in the background.
It's a
Nick,
toolbox.
I'm not trying to put you on blast, but I don't really think you're much of a tool guy. So I'm curious as to why you have that.
For decoration solely. That's why.
For decoration only. So I will get into in just a minute why we're going to be, or why Nick is so decked out in red. But on today's show, we've got a jam-packed show for you guys. A lot to get into. We're going to discuss Russell Wilson and Drew Brees and their futures, one potential retirement, one potential trade. We'll get into that in a little bit. Obviously, last week, the breaking news was sadly Tiger Woods, who got in that crazy accident, has since then had multiple surgeries and is currently recovering. But Nick and I will discuss just the accident and just Tiger Woods in general, what he means to the sport of golf, and what he means to us as well. And then a little later in the show, we're going to get into our NFL division topics, previews in a sense. So we're going to start with the two teams, or the two divisions that are represented in the Super Bowl, which would be the AFC West and the NFC North. We won't be talking about the Super Bowl teams. There will be a link in the podcast if you want to hear us talk about the Chiefs and the Bucs. So a little bit later on, some NFL talk, and basically from this podcast on up until draft week, pretty much, we will be discussing a different division every single week. But, you know, we got to get into this Arizona Cardinals breaking news this morning. For those of you who don't know, J.J. Watt is signing with the Arizona Cardinals. It's reportedly a 2-year deal for $31 million. And Nick, he's getting $23 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
Now, that may not be like Aaron Donald money. Obviously, it's only a 2-year deal. But that's a good chunk of change for a guy that is in his 10th NFL year as a defensive end and has had multiple injuries in the last year. So I'm just going to give the floor to you, my man. Take it away. I see the big smile on your face, and just tell us your reaction.
Well, first of all, before I give my reaction, I just want to show you guys I am a fan of this team. Clearly, I got a Chandler Jones and Christian Kirk jersey back here. Not going to say where I got them, but I have them. I obviously have the toolbox back here. I got the hat. I got the mug that's filled to the brim with coffee, so I need to watch how I'm spilled on my computer. And I also have, of course, the sash here. And then look at this cool shirt right here. This cool shirt, Arizona Cardinals. You get it, right? You get everybody gets it. Okay. It's a lot of red. It's a lot of red. Like Cardinals red, because this Cardinals team is going places. They just signed J.J. Watt, like you mentioned. They now have a tandem of Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt. Now, I'll tell you this, Jared. 3-4 years ago, it's the best tandem in the NFL. Yeah, J.J. Watt's a little older. Chandler Jones a little older. Chandler Jones coming off an injury last year as well. Maybe not the same as it would have been 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still amazing to think about that the Cardinals edge rushers are now J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones. Not to mention J.J. Watt's locker room presence. This is awesome. We give him $15.5 million per year, $23 million guaranteed. That's hoping he's on the field, right? We know there's a lot of. Say this though. Here's the good news, because when I heard this news initially, I was like, obviously awesome. And then you think about it in the back of your head, you're like, he's been injured a lot. The year after he came off, I believe it was back surgery. Could have been his ACL surgery. I'm forgetting. 2018, he had like the most sacks on the team. He played well, and that was when he had another edge rusher on his team in Jadeveon Clowney. So I really think that this is going to be a good year for the Cardinals on defense, especially on the defensive line and that edge rushing position. And I just, Jared, it's nice to see the Cardinals trying a lot. We go back to them, giving up on Josh Rosen and getting Kyler Murray #1, firing Steve Wilkes after 1 year when that clearly didn't work, bringing in Cliff Kingsbury, an innovative offensive coach. You go out and you get DeAndre Hopkins. Didn't matter what you gave up for him. You got DeAndre Hopkins. And now this year you go and you get J.J. Watt. And it's just exciting as a Cardinals fan and if you're a fan of the NFL, to see a team really, really try and compete in this NFC West that's just brutal, right? You got to think you hear Russell Wilson might be leaving the Seahawks and Matthew Stafford's joining the Rams, and who knows if Deshaun Watson's going to join the 49ers. The Cardinals are at least going to do their best to compete. And I love it as a fan, and I'm glad we're not just kind of giving up. Not that I expect this to, but not relegating ourselves to fourth place no matter what in this NFC West. Yeah, we can make the playoffs still being in fourth place. I think the Cardinals have bigger hopes for that, and they hope for the jump of Kyler Murray from year 2 to year 3. You hope DeAndre Hopkins stays healthy. Maybe you hope Larry Fitzgerald comes back for one more year. And now you already fixed the edge rushing position that a lot of people said the Cardinals needed to change. So this is only a plus, and go Cardinals.
All right. So before I get into, my little stance on this, I have to ask, because you are just, I mean, you're, I don't know, you're smiling through you're underwear right now. So, are the Cardinals Super Bowl contenders with this move?
I mean, that's a tough question to ask, right? We didn't make the playoffs last year.
No, it's actually a very easy question for me to ask. It might be a tough question for you to answer.
No, I mean, we didn't make the playoffs, Jared, last year. Yeah, we wouldn't have made the playoffs if Kyler was healthy that last game, right? If he plays, we make the playoffs, and who knows what happens, right? NFL is the NFL. But I'm not going to sit here and say a team that didn't make the playoffs is a Super Bowl contender after adding a 30-plus-year-old edge rusher. I'm not going to sit here and say that. We need to draft well. We need to figure out the running back position. We need to shore up the defense a little bit in some other spots. So, no, and we might lose Patrick Peterson as well. So I don't think this makes us a Super Bowl contender. If J.J. Watt is healthy, though, I think this absolutely makes us a playoff contender. I think we make the playoffs now this year if Watt is healthy, and, of course, the other essential players. When you look at this offseason, too, the Cardinals essentially get back Chandler Jones, too. They add Chandler Jones back to the rotation. Most of last year, we didn't have Chandler Jones. So I think if we have Kyler in that last game and we have Chandler Jones the whole season, I think we make the playoffs. So now you have Kyler healthy. You can add back Chandler Jones and you add J.J. Watt. Yeah, I think we're a playoff contender. Super Bowl contender? I'm not going to say that it's quite yet.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that you were still on planet Earth, because
of course,
you never know.
Sure, come on.
These crazy, trades and signings and acquisitions happen. And hey, I'm guilty of it as well. If this was my Cowboys right now, obviously you're ecstatic. You're kind of thinking, all right, that's what we need. So I just wanted to make sure that you were still, your feet were still on the ground, and we were still here level. We're on the same page. I'm with you. I really think this does elevate the Cardinals defense. You are right, though. Patrick Peterson, not a guarantee that he's coming back. They do need to shore up their linebacking core as well. And I think another big question, something that I don't want to say overlooked last year, but where is Simmons going to play? And Simmons was obviously your number 1 draft pick last year. Coming out, was he going to be a safety? Was he going to be a linebacker? We've seen him put his hand in the dirt and even rush the passer at Clemson. He literally played almost every position. He even played outside corner at Clemson, right? But in the NFL, I think that the Cardinals really need to figure out one specific position that they can say, all right, this is where you're going to play. Now go and kind of find those tools, just basically excel at that one position, as opposed to having to learn 2 or 3 different things. So I don't think it was the season that he had hoped for last year. It was an underachievement, in my opinion. But if they can get him in one solid position, along with keeping Chandler Jones healthy and J.J. Watt healthy, this defense is going to be pretty good. And you're going to need it as long as Russell Wilson stays in Seattle. And with the acquisition of Matthew Stafford with the Rams, I think that elevates the Rams as well, right? So this is already one of the toughest divisions, and the Cardinals are going to need as many defensive pieces as they can get.
Yeah, no, and again, we need to figure out the corner position. We have a slot corner in Byron Murphy that we signed last year, and obviously Isaiah Simmons isn't going to be playing corner for us. Simmons played awesome. Budda Baker was awesome last year. We get back Jalen Thompson, who was a solid underrated safety that didn't play a lot last year. And then, of course, the corner position without Patrick Peterson is a little iffy. Obviously, we need to figure that out. Robert Alford was also a complete failure and never stepped on the field for us after 2 years. One of the worst free agent signings in the history of the National Football League. But so I want to add this though. When you look at this defense for the Cardinals, it's got to get better because we signed a couple linebackers last year that were very, very serviceable. We added Isaiah Simmons. Now we add J.J. Watt. We didn't really have that other edge rusher on the team, too. We signed Marcus Golden in the middle of the season, a former Cardinal, because Chandler Jones went out. But we were always, kind of limited on sacks during the season. Budda Baker was getting sacks at safety, right? And so I think you now have Vance Joseph in his third year as defensive coordinator, something that's kind of rare in the NFL, a defensive coordinator that they stayed with a team for 3 consecutive years, even though they haven't made the playoffs. J.J. Watt has some familiarity with Vance Joseph as well. He was on the Texans defensive coaching staff for 3 years. So this is nothing but good for the Cardinals defense. A lot of fans think Patrick Peterson the last few years also was kind of regressing, wasn't playing worth his contract. So if the Cardinals can bring him back at a better rate than he was playing at, I think we're good. But there's still a lot of questions with the Cardinals this offseason, and I'm not going to sit here and say they're Super Bowl contender again, but I do think this defense gets a big up with J.J. Watt.
Right. So I'm glad you said that because my last point before I'll give it to you to kind of, finish out this segment is I think the Cardinals are a good team, right? They're in a good division. They've got some great young pieces with Kyler Murray and obviously DeAndre Hopkins to work with on the offensive side. And defensively, if they can get some help in the secondary, they can be pretty good. I would say they would be at least top 12, in total defense if they can get some secondary pieces. But here's my thing with J.J. Watt. Was it more about the money? Was it more about, DeAndre Hopkins and that relationship and speaking with him and saying, hey, man, Arizona is a great place. Come play with me and let's finish what we started, in Houston? Because to me, Arizona is not a Super Bowl contender. And not saying that there are 20 other teams that are Super Bowl contenders out there, but from just a team standpoint, I think there may be some other teams that J.J. Watt could have gone to and had a better chance to win a Super Bowl right now. Like we both mentioned, J.J. Watt's in his 10th, going into his 11th year, right? Like he's on the wrong side of 30 for an athlete. And how many more years does he really have? So to me, it's great, and he gets to reunite with DeAndre Hopkins, and he's getting a lot of money, and he gets to play in a warm weather city, all that. But is he really looking to win a Super Bowl? Because I don't know, the Packers, the Browns were looking pretty good. There's a couple other teams that I think he could have went to and maybe had a better shot right now to win a Super Bowl.
Well, I'll say this, Jared. I don't know what the financials are for those teams. I only did research, obviously, on the teams that we were talking about today. So unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head if those teams could afford them. Yeah, of course, the Packers and the Bills and the Browns are potentially more Super Bowl contenders than the Cardinals are. But again, I'm saying, Jared, there's a lot went wrong for the Cardinals last year too to help them not make the playoffs. It's a key players on that team. And I do think that you add another really, really good player, J.J. Watt. I'm not going to say he's a superstar anymore, but I think he's a really, really good player, above average defender for sure. And you get back Chandler Jones, and you have a healthy Kyler Murray that really wasn't healthy most of that season last year. I think this team, is a good team. It's also hell of a lot better weather than Green Bay and Buffalo and Cleveland. That might have been a part of it too. J.J. Watt probably sat there in Houston and was like, it's 5 degrees in Texas. Where is it not 5 degrees next year? Arizona. It doesn't get 5 degrees in Arizona. So, maybe that was part of it. It's a cool, interesting coach. He's friends with DeAndre Hopkins. There's Larry Fitzgerald, hopefully, on the team. Kyler Murray's a young up-and-coming quarterback. He's on a rookie contract. You don't know what's going to go on with the Packers, right? What if the Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur thing sours? Buffalo, that was an easy choice. I would bet they couldn't afford him. And Cleveland, as much as we all, want Cleveland to succeed, it's still Cleveland, and it's still the Browns. So I know the Cardinals don't have that good of a juju with them as well, having not won the Super Bowl and having the longest streak besides the before the Cubs and their championship aspirations. But, it's truth. It was the worst thing about hearing the Cubs win the World Series that year was that the Cardinals were now the worst team. I didn't know that before that. So, I just think it's great weather. It's a fun coach, and it was affordable for him. So I think it works out. I think the Cardinals do have a chance to win a Super Bowl. I'm not going to say that they're completely out of it, that they don't have a chance. I mean, if Kyler Murray steps up and plays like a superstar, at quarterback with that talent and this is overall team, absolutely they can get to the Super Bowl. Are they the Chiefs? No. Are they the Buffalo Bills? No. But, you never know. Those teams are AFC teams. So technically you still get there based on that. And the NFC West, in some ways, could actually regress this year. We don't know what Stafford and McVay is going to look like. We don't know what Seattle and Pete Carroll and all that's going to look like. And we'll get to that in a second. And we definitely don't know what the 49ers are going to be next year. So, some hope there. Some hope. It's better than all the NFC West teams. I'll tell you that. This is the best team to be on right now, the Arizona Cardinals.
A lot of unknowns.
But Jared, here, I'll switch topics here. Let's go to Russell Wilson because we mentioned his name a bunch. There was rumors that came out since we last recorded that Russell Wilson potentially wants to get traded, and his relationship with Seattle, although we knew was souring, has really soured. So what are your first thoughts on just these rumors and answer the question? Do you think he gets traded, and is it to one of those 4 or 5 teams he's mentioned?
Yeah, this was such a head scratcher to me. Like, this is Russell Wilson, right? I mean, the dude obviously deserves every single penny that Seattle is paying him. He's taken them to 2 Super Bowls, won 1, right? I mean, and this guy I don't want to say it's the same situation with Deshaun Watson in Houston because I think that's a little different. I feel like that relationship obviously is completely fractured. Deshaun Watson feels like there is no respect coming from the organization to himself. In Seattle, I do feel like the door is open, maybe not wide open, maybe about halfway, or 3/4 open to where Russell Wilson can, give his input in certain types of things. But listen, when you've been to Super Bowls, won 1 already, and you are one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, that door should be completely wide open. You should be able to go in and out as you please, in a sense, and basically say, here's my input as to how we can get better, right? Russell Wilson is not only just the face of the Seattle Seahawks. In my opinion, he's one of the faces of the NFL, maybe right up there with a Patrick Mahomes. And so the fact that he seems to feel, I would say, a little bit of disrespect, right? Because, like I said, where there's smoke, there's got to be some type of fire. Because what I will say is, if Russell Wilson didn't want to go anywhere, or he could have very easily come out in an interview, any type of social media, and simply said, I'm a Seahawk for life. That's all you have to say. I'm not going anywhere, right? But the fact that reportedly he has entertained the thought of being traded, and there are 4 teams that he is reportedly willing to go to: Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints, Las Vegas Raiders. Don't know why I said LA. Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chicago Bears, right? So those are the 4 teams that Russell Wilson would reportedly want to go to. The fact that he is even entertaining that tells me that there's something going on within that organization, and somehow, some way, they have upset him. Now, I'm not saying, right, obviously, he's still a player, only one of 53, but you are the franchise quarterback, right? And you have proven your worth. So I don't know where it went wrong, but I think the longer this gets drawn out, the more likely a chance that there's a trade, right? This either needs to get nipped in the bud right now by the Seattle Seahawks organization and sit down with Russell Wilson and hash out whatever beef they have. Because if this gets closer to the summer, if we're getting into May, June, July, closer to training camp, and we're still having these types of discussions, I think there's just more of a chance that he gets traded, right? That's just a snowball that's continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I'm Seattle, I'm literally trying to schedule a meeting with Russell Wilson as soon as I can to say, hey, man, let's hash this out. Why are you upset? Because I'm telling you, this gets to the summer and we get to training camp, Seattle, y'all might have a problem.
Yeah, Jared, this is a good day. This is a good day for both of us. I'll tell you that right now, because not only did my team just sign J.J. Watt, hearing this Russell Wilson news is just great, right? As a Cardinals fan, I'll say this though: you added 4 teams. I was hearing the Cowboys as a 5th team today. So
did I not say the Cowboys?
Did you say the Cowboys? I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry. So
who'd you say?
It's Dallas, Chicago, New Orleans, and Las Vegas.
Okay, so I've heard
the 4 teams.
I've heard the Jets as well as a team that he is on his list. It's on his list. That's what I heard. So But here's the thing. When you look at Russell Wilson, okay, it's very weird. And I'm not going to extend too much on this because this is just a short little topic for today. We just wanted to mention it. But, you look at Russell Wilson, right? And Jared, haven't you noticed there's a lot of non-football stuff going on with him lately? Like he's been doing a lot of stuff with his wife. He's been talking to celebrities, kind of getting a little Hollywood. Now you hear the teams that he wants to go to. The Cowboys and Saints, great brands, great football teams, right? Then Vegas, Miami, New York, right? It's almost like Russell Wilson. It's like it sounds like he doesn't want to be in Seattle anymore, right? That's what it kind of sounds like. I'm going to say this is the only thing I'm going to say. When you start hearing rumors, and like you said, when he's not denying them, or he has to have his agent come out and say it, right? We got Deshaun Watson tweeting about stuff, taking stuff off his bio, clearly saying he's not playing for the Texans anymore. Russell Wilson ain't doing that, I'll say this. It's March 1st when we're recording this. By March 1st next year, Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson will not be with Seattle. That's my guess. I'm pulling the old Carson Wentz, Doug.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're doubling down right now.
I'm doubling down because it just doesn't seem like it's gonna work anymore. And I think I'll say by next year, because I could see one more year, but by next year, March 1st, either Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson will not be a Seattle Seahawks, and it could be both. And I think Seattle could really be in trouble if they don't fix this Russell Wilson, because like you mentioned, Jared, Russell Wilson is one of the most famous people, in sports, right? My girlfriend who does not watch football really at all knows who Russell Wilson is, okay? And that's not because we played them twice last year. She already knew who he was before she was dating me. You know what I'm saying? She's not a big football fan. So this guy, is big time. And that city of Seattle, they're getting a hockey team next year, which is great for them. But, sports in that town has not been the best lately. And you heard the stuff with the Mariners GM talking crap on his own players and stuff like that. It's just, I'm telling you, I'm calling it right now. March 1st, 2022, Russell Wilson or Pete Carroll will not be with Seattle. I'm calling it right now.
Yeah, I'll say this really quick because you're right. We do need to move on to another quarterback. But I think you bring up a great point about this may not potentially be completely about football. And for the reasons that you just mentioned, right? Dallas is a huge market, right? Even though I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. They have not been competitive and relevant in 2 decades, right? They haven't won a championship, a Super Bowl since 1995, 1996, right? But they are so relevant because Jerry Jones keeps them in the spotlight. Whether it's good or bad news, it's always some type of news with Dallas, right? And so you're going to a state, no state income tax, and you're going to have other opportunities outside of football to make money and continue to build your brand. So Dallas, yes, I can understand that. Same thing with New Orleans. It's a great city. They've obviously have a winning pedigree with head coach Sean Payton. They've been to a Super Bowl in the last decade, right? So Chicago, another big city, even though they haven't, fielded competitive teams recently, it's more of the market that you're going to. Chicago exclusively, they have, I think, a worse offensive line than what Seattle does, right? And I think one of the issues that Russell Wilson has had with Seattle is that they haven't put resources into building a strong offensive line for him. Now, I don't know the complete stat on this, but since Russell Wilson came into the league in 2011, he is, I believe, top 3 in quarterbacks getting sacked and pressures, right? The dude is constantly running for his life. And because he is so athletic and so great, he's able to make plays out of the pocket and kind of make impromptu plays. But I think he wants a situation where he can say, you know what, I want to be able to sit back in a clean pocket and be able to just deliver the ball to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and my other weapons. But he can't do that consistently because he's having to run for his life. So if Chicago was really a contender on his list, there's no way that it's just about football because Chicago has a worse offensive line, in my opinion, than Seattle. So you're right. This is more than just about football. This is about his kind of that he can do off the field just as much as on the field.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'll say this, Jared, because we're about to talk about this team. Imagine Russell Wilson going to the Saints and facing Tom Brady twice a year. Imagine those games. Imagine those games. Like, just imagine if that happened. That's nothing. We're not even going to talk about it in the podcast, but just to put that in your mind if you're listening or you're watching right now. Imagine if Russell Wilson went to the Saints. How great that would be. and how great that would be for me as a Cardinals fan too, not having to play them twice a year. All right, so let's move on to the Saints. You know, we're not gonna extend on this quite very long because I think we both know the answer to this question. But Drew Brees released a workout video, not like Jared, you or I in the gym, on the treadmill, like doing NFL style workouts. Do you think this means he's coming back? Do you think this means that he's not retired, or do you think this is maybe him just trolling?
Just having a good time, man.
Who has a good time running with a tire on their back? What are you talking about?
So what? Just because you're potentially not going to play football anymore doesn't mean that you can't stay in shape. Doesn't mean you can't still work out. I've seen a lot of athletes. I've seen a lot of athletes, not even just football players, who once their career's over, they kind of pack on some extra pounds, right? I mean, obviously you're not training like you would if you were playing the sport, but I mean, look at Charles Barkley, for instance, like, not to throw him under the bus, but the dude obviously has gained some pounds since he retired, and he's been retired for multiple years now, over decades. But still, what I'm saying is Drew Brees, I think, is just still trying to work out, right? Still fresh in his mind. I think the door is slightly cracked that he can make a return. I think, yes, 98% chance that he retires. But hey, maybe one of his boys called him up and said, "Hey, man, you want to come get a workout? You want to just hang?" Some guys like to hang and work out. I mean, so I'm not really going to take much into this video. More of just he's trying to show that even though he may be in his 40s, he's still got it. He can still work out and keep up with the young Bucs. None more than that, man.
You know what he should be doing if he's coming back to the NFL is working out that shoulder, because that was the problem last year. That guy couldn't throw a football further than me last year. So, I couldn't throw a football actually far. That's not that big of a knock. But I'm just saying, like, the guy doing that thing, the tire behind his back or whatever he was, or the weight behind his back is not going to help him throw it down the field 30 more yards. Okay, that's his problem. So, no, Jerry, I agree with you. I don't think this means anything, and I think this might be a little bit of trolling. A guy that's used to working out and doesn't want to get away from it. I will say this, though. You're not going to see Phillip Rivers running with a tire behind his back this offseason. So it is a little interesting that he did, come out with this video and all that stuff. And it wouldn't be completely surprising if he came back. Obviously, we saw Brett Favre do it tons of times. And we've seen Tom Brady not retire over the last few years, too. So it's not out of the question. But I think for the Saints, and we'll get to this later, they probably want him to go away, because I think they have a better future without him in a more near future too. All right, well, so we're going to step away from football for a second and talk about a very, very important story, obviously, that happened. And in a second, we'll get the football we're going to get back to is our NFC South and AFC West kind of previews and overviews of their last year's season and this year's season. But obviously, like Jared mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we want to talk about Tiger Woods, because obviously a really, really bad thing happened to him last week. He got in a horrible car accident. Thank God he is alive after this car accident too, because when you see the car and you hear what happened, it doesn't sound good. And I'm sorry to say this, but it strikingly resembled, not exactly the terms, but like the Kobe Bryant stuff. Finding out about something super early in the morning about a guy that everyone knows, and it wasn't good. Now, the details of it is that he crashed his car in a city called Rolling Hills Estates. It's over in Palos Verdes. It's in a luxury area of Los Angeles. He was doing some golf stuff with some celebrities. The last few days before that, he had been part of the Genesis Invitational, a yearly golf tournament at Riviera Country Club in LA. He actually presented the trophy to the winner, Max Homa. Another LA native, a really cool moment. He was on the broadcast talking about how he wanted to be at the Masters. And then all of a sudden on Tuesday, he's in this horrible car accident. We know that he broke both of his legs, shattered his ankle. He was already dealing with back issues before the crash. That was what was keeping him out of all the golf tournaments this year. Just not good. Obviously, he's alive. And he's been transported now from one hospital to a better one, Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. But it's just, it's a sad and very unfortunate series of events that we as sports people, Jared, don't like to hear. So what was your first thoughts on this? And just what are your thoughts right now after it's been almost a week since this has happened, and it's still kind of lingering, a weird kind of thing in the back of your mind?
Yeah, no, thankfully he is alive. because when you see the car and how messed up it was, my first reaction was, how could anyone survive that crash, right? And the reports started to come out that because of the safety features of that car,
Mm-hmm.
that actually saved his life. So, if he would have been in another car, who knows what would happen. But I don't even want to think about that. We are just thankful that Tiger Woods is alive and now recovering, like you mentioned, at Cedars-Sinai. But Nick, I do have to tell you, right? I got some of those rumblings of the Kobe
Yeah, for
situation.
sure.
That same type of thing. You're right. Happened early in the morning. I believe it was 7:30 or around that time.
Yeah.
Very early when the crash happened. I believe it was over an hour later before it started to get reported and recirculated. Where people found out. But you just a golf icon, and more than just golf, I think a sports icon, right? Someone that, for myself, being Black, being an African American, someone that you look up to not only because he was great at his sport, but what he has done for golf, right? And bringing it into another stratosphere, just with recognition and minorities and other people, and not just white people playing golf, because mainly golf is, I would say, up until Tiger Woods started playing, it was mainly a white sport. You didn't see many Black people on the golf course or other minorities in general. So what he has done in opening doors and that aspect has been simply unbelievable, right? And so, and then I think what comes to mind is everything that he has gone throughout his career, right? From the highest of highs, the lowest to lows, winning the Masters, all the records that he has set, but then all the other injuries that he has gone through, right? ACL surgery, multiple back surgeries. Obviously we remember that the entire scandal with his wife, the cheating scandal, right? And he bounced back from that as well. Yeah. So his career and life have been a complete roller coaster. And because of the person that he is, we have got to see everything, right? And now we're at the point where another major incident has happened in his life, and I think he is very lucky to be alive right now. So, there's so many things. All those things go into my head is Tiger Woods and who he is as a person, what he has done for the sport, what he has overcome, and the things, that he has had to deal with in his life on and off of the golf course. But like I said, I'm just happy that he is alive, and, the recovery will be long for him. And who knows if he will ever get back on the golf course again. I don't really care about that. I think this is more about hopefully he can return to just being the person and having the fully functional body that we hope he can have, right? Being able to walk correctly, right? Not having to use a cane. Like you mentioned, he already had major back issues, and I really haven't even heard if his back was further injured from this. I think we've been talking about the shattered ankle and the broken legs, but I really haven't heard any other reports of if he further injured his back. So maybe you can elaborate on that. But like I said, I just hope that he can get back to 100% as a person, and then worry about golf if that's something that he's still choosing to do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the comeback looks like. I think everyone's been pointing to, although sort of similar, Ben Hogan from the 1940s had a similar incident where he got in a really, really bad car accident. He was more at the height of his golf career. Ben Hogan, one of the best golfers of all time in the Hall of Fame, one of those names you hear, all that stuff. If you guys haven't heard, look it up. He was in a very, very bad car accident where he survived it through certain circumstances and broke every piece of his body and all that stuff, and came back and was still a great golfer. Tiger Woods obviously was at the end of his career, and it sucks to hear this news because it might be the end of Tiger Woods, and that catching Jack Nicklaus might be a little bit harder now, or might be impossible now. Tiger had already took him an arm and a leg to just even make it to the Masters and to make it to the U.S. Open and to be healthy for all these golf tournaments every single year. And so, adding this to it, I don't know. Hey, maybe not sitting there, not using your back for golf swings and just sitting there in a wheelchair for a couple months, maybe it will help him. I don't know, but that's the bright side of looking at it, right? Like maybe not playing athletics could actually help his career. I don't know. But, when you hear broken legs too, you always think of Alex Smith. Right, and there's news about Alex Smith today, too, that we're not even going to get into. But it's just, It was not good. And I'll tell you this from personal experience, Jared. I was actually staying at the hotel that he was staying at last summer, and I drove those roads at night, and those roads are sketchy. They're fast. They're downhill. That peninsula area is very windy. It's not lit very well. I can imagine maybe the sun was in his eyes bright and early at 7 and 10 in the morning. We've heard there was no alcohol. There was no substances. He was normal. Right. And God, thank God there was no other cars coming the other way. Because when you actually look at how he crashed, he would have annihilated somebody on the other side of the street. So it's just, this is lucky. And again, it's something that could have happened to anybody, right? He was wearing the seatbelt. These, like I said, the car features helped him out. But I mean, man, like, don't speed down a hill at 100 miles an hour at 7 in the morning. Like, I don't know if he's going 100, but it's just, it's a lesson learned too, that this can happen to anybody. And it seems like Tiger, this just happened to. I don't know what happened, but at least for personal experience, I can tell you guys those roads are very, very dangerous. And when I was driving at them at night, it was difficult. So, we hope for Tiger's quick recovery. We hope that all those billions and billions of dollars can help him recover faster. And I would love to just see Tiger Woods on the golf course again for a tournament. I'd love to be able to place a bet on him. You know what I'm saying? So that's going to be really, really interesting. But any last words on Tiger, Jay? Well, actually, I'll say one thing too. When you look at golf too, and you mentioned a lot of it, so I don't want to steal what you said, but like, how many people would be watching golf now if Tiger Woods hadn't played? He is so popular. He made golf like cool, right? When generally golf is like what the old guys do at the country club. Right, when you're 70 and you can't play real sports anymore, right? You go play golf, right?
Yeah.
So Tiger Woods has made golf into a thing, and this guy's impact on sports and golf in general is amazing. But Jared, I'll let you get the last words on Tiger before we switch to the NFL again.
No, not at all, man. You summed it up great, man. We hope for a speedy recovery, and like I said, I hope that he can get back to the person and the dad, obviously that he was before, being able to, go play golf with his son and that type of thing. And then if he so chooses to go back on the golf course and play competitively, I think that's something for down the road. But right now, we're just hoping and wishing that he gets back to normal.
Yeah, no, of course. All right, well, we're going to switch back to the NFL. So we're going to do the NFC South and the AFC West. Again, we're going to reiterate, we are not doing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Kansas City Chiefs. We already did that essentially in our Super Bowl recap. So the link is below in our description. It should be the first thing in the comment section right there in the description. Go look at that, and there's even the time codes for when that happens when you go to that video too. So it'd be really easy for you if you don't care about the Falcons and the Saints and the Panthers, or you don't care about the Broncos, Raiders, and Chargers. Go ahead and look at that, because we did probably even more of a real recap with those teams, because we got just those teams in general. So go look at those. We are going to be doing, like I said, in the NFC South, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Carolina today. And then in the AFC West, Denver, Las Vegas, I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas, and the LA Chargers. So, Jared, let's start with the NFC South. Who do you want to start with? Should we just start with the Saints since we were talking about them earlier?
Let's do it.
Okay, so, when I look at the Saints here going into next year, obviously the Drew Brees stuff is the most interesting. It's the most newsworthy. Is Drew Brees coming back? Is he really retired? And what are they going to do at that quarterback position? I think that's the main thing. And when you look at the Saints, Jared, too, this team is still a really good team, even with questions at quarterback, right? Michael Thomas was not healthy last year and only played to try to win that Super Bowl for Drew Brees. We know he'll be healthier next year, and he'll be the Michael Thomas that we all know last year. The defense was number 4 in the NFL. That has nothing to do with Drew Brees, right? Drew Brees didn't play on defense, so that defense is number 4. And so, this team is very, very solid. Good offensive line, good at their weapons on offense, although Jared Cook kind of regressed a little bit at tight end. You still have Alvin Kamara, and you have a healthy Michael Thomas and the rest of that receiving core. So for me, Jared, it's really just a conversation about what are they doing at quarterback. Do they maybe trade for Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson out of nowhere? Do they go to the draft? Or do they start Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston? It's going to be interesting. So I'll let you take over here first, because I don't think there's much to say about this team besides what they're going to, will the quarterback stuff work out? What do you see them doing at quarterback this year? And what do you think the best thing they should do at quarterback is this year?
Best thing for them is you mentioned the two names. Do whatever you can to trade for Deshaun Watson and or Russell Wilson.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's Deshaun Watson first because he's younger. They're both on, $150 million plus contracts. So the money it's not really about the money. You're going to have to fork out with the money. And you've been doing it with Drew Brees for years and years.
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't be a problem, or at least this Saints organization should know how to work with a quarterback that is on a $30+ million contract. So I think Deshaun Watson should be, the golden egg, the golden guy that they look towards because of his age and what we've seen him do with a not so good team with Houston, right? Like imagine, we've seen what Deshaun Watson can do with DeAndre Hopkins. That just got taken away from him, right? But imagine Deshaun Watson with an Alvin Kamara, with a Michael Thomas, and with that defense. I mean, I think that might elevate the Saints over the Bucs, because right now the Bucs, we have to put them at number one because they just won the Super Bowl, right? But I think the Saints are very close number two. And let's not forget, the last 2 years, the Saints have won this division, right? The Bucs had to play road games to get to the Super Bowl. It's been the Saints who have won this last couple of years. So you're right. It is, I would say, very close to a complete team. And if they get the right quarterback, I think they are right there neck and neck with the Buccaneers, competing not only for the division, but competing for a Super Bowl championship. So, as tough as this is for me to say, if Jameis Winston was starting for the Saints the last couple games of the regular season and in the playoffs, I think the Saints would have had a better chance to win. Drew Brees was just not healthy. Like you mentioned, could not throw the ball 15 yards down the field, right? And it's not like they have speed burners or anything like that. It's just when you can't stretch a defense, it makes it easier for the defense to play against you. And so Drew Brees, more than likely going to retire. And I say it's Deshaun Watson, then Russell Wilson, then Jameis Winston, in that order. You go for one of those two. Okay. I don't care what you have to give up. You give up 3 first-round picks. You give up a good defensive player. We've seen this, Nick. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise. You don't have a quarterback, you're not winning in this league. You don't have an elite quarterback, more than likely you're not going to win, right? We see that the off years when the Joe Flacco's of the world or the Trent Dilfers of the world, right? Just because they have great pieces around them, they have a great defense, they have solid weapons. It happens every once in a while. But on a competitive year in, year out basis, the consistency, you need a great quarterback at the very least to be competitive. So if you're the Saints, you're not that many pieces away. You're a quarterback away. You do whatever the hell you have to do to get Deshaun Watson and or Russell Wilson. Period.
Jared, I did not think you'd take that route, but you know what? What have we been seeing, right? We've been seeing J.J. Watt to the Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals. In other sports, like guys going all these weird. Well, Tom Brady, of course, the Buccaneers being the biggest one. So I would not be surprised if we do have a Deshaun Watson to one of these star teams or a Russell Wilson. I'm going to disagree with you, though. I think they should do a 1-year trial with a Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. Also, I think Taysom Hill should probably be the quarterback. Jameis Winston is he's an average quarterback at best, but I think Taysom Hill, because there's more potential there, I say you go with him. And I put Jameis Winston back at the backup quarterback. I think, you look at what you can do. Maybe you could even shore up this roster a lot more this year. If you guys don't know, by the way, the salary cap because of the coronavirus and all that stuff is being capped a lot lower than normal. I believe it's $180 million. Normally it'd be over $210 million. So there's a lot of money being lost out. And so I think this is the perfect year if you're the Saints. You still have a top 10 defense, a top 5 defense, actually. And you still have great offensive weapons besides a quarterback. I think you roll with the Jameis Winston or the Taysom Hill this year and forget about trading for one of those guys and giving up all your picks. And I think you roll with these guys this 1 year, and then when the cap jumps another 30-40 million next year, then you can add one of those quarterbacks or something like that along the lines, or draft somebody or something like that.
These quarterbacks just grow on trees. They're just always available.
Jared, we know what we're getting from Jameis Winston. No, we know what we're getting from Taysom Hill. Jameis Winston, he was a big yardage guy, he was a big touchdown guy, he was a big interception guy, but there was something wrong with his eyes, right? Like literally there was something wrong with his eyes. So you look at that, and then you look at Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill, they played in some very solid games with Taysom Hill. Yes, they did lose some games with him as well, but Taysom Hill is the modern day quarterback. He can run and he can throw. He can also block and catch passes and play defense and play special teams too. But, realistically, I think he's more of a modern style quarterback. And I would just go with the cheap $10 million answer in Taysom Hill for this 1 year. See what you can do, because he's pretty cheap right now. And I say use it like the Cardinals are doing with Kyler Murray. And you go on that rookie contract like Taysom Hill kind of has, and you go for it with 1 year. And then if it didn't work and you didn't seem like you were a Super Bowl contender, then you go out and figure it out, right? You figure out somebody else. But I think they should go with the in-house guys rather than go trade everything and give up some of your roster for a guy like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, who obviously would make them a Super Bowl contender, but what then happens to the team after that, right? You can't just go all in.
I don't. You make no sense right now. You just contradicted yourself, right? Because
no, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Hear me out. And you can go back and listen to this recording yourself. Why? You said that you think that this team should save its money, right? Not spend $30-40 million on a Deshaun Watson or a Russell Wilson, not give up the draft picks, not have to potentially give up a player as well, and run with the guys who are already in place in this system, right? They already know the system, and it wouldn't be a huge transition for them. But then you just said the Saints were to get a Deshaun Watson or a Russell Wilson, that would put them in the Super Bowl contender category. Now, refresh my memory, Nick, but what are these NFL teams trying to do? What is the goal? Is it what's the goal?
Okay, this is what I'm trying to explain. Is that with the Saints specifically, they have a good enough roster to where they might be able to get to the Super Bowl with a guy like Taysom Hill, with Jameis Winston. Yes, of course, adding Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson to your team makes you a Super Bowl contender. Even if the Cardinals added Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, they would be more of a Super Bowl contender. But you have a guy in Kyler Murray that potentially could get you that promised land on a
the Saints
smaller
don't.
Yes, well, no. I know. I'm not saying that these guys are better, but everybody's been preaching that Taysom Hill's the next guy. Then you throw him in a couple games and he doesn't play the best last year because he didn't have a full off season, and everybody's acting like he's a horrible quarterback now. I don't think Jameis Winston should be the quarterback. I think maybe, special moments he can be quarterback like he was last year, but I think he's a solid backup. I think if you're anybody like you look at the Cardinals, right? We had no backup, and we ended up not making the playoffs because of it, right? So I would love to have Jameis Winston that last game against the Rams and John Wolford, right? So I think they have a good enough roster right now. I just don't think you kill the future of the team by adding quarterback, because did the Texans succeed with Deshaun Watson? Did they win a Super Bowl? No, they didn't, because they paid him too much. And they didn't have anybody else.
The Texans don't have the Saints roster.
Okay, but who does sort of have the roster is the Seattle Seahawks. And they haven't been anywhere close to the Super Bowl in 5 or 6 years, realistically. Right? They made the playoffs, but they haven't really been true contenders. And they've flubbed in big games. So I'm not saying that, those guys can't win a Super Bowl. But I'm saying if that roster starts to deteriorate, the Saints just become, again, just an average team like the Texans if you just pay only Deshaun Watson and you can't pay anybody else, right? You're going to lose Michael Thomas. You're going to lose Alvin Kamara. The reason we're saying this team is so good is they have all the weapons and then the quarterback. We've seen teams win the Super Bowl, Jared, with like Peyton Manning with no arm, right? We've seen Trent Dilfer win the Super Bowl before, Joe Flacco, right? It's possible. So I'm saying for this 1 year, you see what Taysom Hill can do, similar to what the Philadelphia Eagles should do with Jalen Hurts, right? You give him the 1 year and you say, hey, let's see what you can do, right? Now that roster is a lot worse, so Jalen Hurts might be a little bit of a, he has a little more leeway there. But I'm just saying, hey, we're going to disagree, Jared. Let's see what happens, right?
It's fine. We're going to disagree. The Saints are going to stick, right? They're not going to swing for the fence, right? They're just going to try to get a single or a double. They're going to mess around with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, and they're not going to make the playoffs, right? And then next year, right, after that 1 year, when the salary cap goes back up to over $210 million, then guess what? Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson aren't going to be there because Russell Wilson is either going to have resolved his issues with Seattle or he's going to have been traded. And Deshaun Watson will have been traded already. So if you're the Saints, you're basically saying, we're okay. We don't need a superstar. We're fine. We're fine. Like I said, these guys don't grow on trees.
Jared, who did they have last year? They had broken arm Drew Brees and Taysom Hill for a couple games, and they went 12-4. And 2 of those games were with Taysom Hill, who didn't have a whole offseason to be the quarterback, right? So I'm just saying, like, they were a great team, even though they didn't have a quarterback. Drew Brees was not a good quarterback last year. So why not go with a guy, give a new guy the whole offseason that knows the playbook, and don't trade away all your assets? Plus, the Saints only have 5 draft picks this year anyways. They can't just give up everybody in this draft. You got to build for the future a little bit.
You can trade future picks, but here's what I really think. Because we've spent so much time talking about this Saints team, I think that just shows how much we really don't care about the Carolina Panthers or the Atlanta Falcons. I think that's what that really means.
You're right.
So so before we have to end this podcast right now, let's at least say something about them, and so we can let people know that there's more than just 2 teams in this division.
I actually have more notes on the Falcons and Panthers too. Let's get to that. I mean, here's the thing. I talk about quarterbacks with these 2 teams too, right? That's the main topic, right? Also, the defenses for these teams are not very good. Now, both these teams do add new defensive coordinators, or excuse me, one adds a new defensive coordinator. Another's defense should get better in general, just based on who they have as a team. They had a young defense last year. Let's just go with the Panthers really quickly. Obviously, they have the star in Christian McCaffrey. They were rumored at having offered up their draft pick for Matt Stafford. Like, they tried to get Matt Stafford. So they clearly want a new quarterback. So I think we're going to see from the Panthers them either draft somebody or maybe they go out and get Deshaun Watson because they have a little bit more assets than, say, the New Orleans Saints, right? And they need a guy more than the Saints. But nonetheless, the Panthers, their offensive line needs major help. They need linebacker help. They need those young guys that they drafted for the last couple of years to produce, because they haven't really the last few years. And then what happens with McCaffrey, right? Do you have to throw McCaffrey into a Watson deal, or do you keep him and draft a quarterback like Mac Jones or the guy from South Dakota, or I'm saying? It's gonna be interesting. So what do you think about the Panthers? Do you think that they can stick with Teddy Bridgewater, or do you think that they're probably going to have to change this up this year?
So I think the way that they constructed Teddy Bridgewater's contract was for this situation exactly. So they're tied to him for this year, right? And if they have to keep him, right? Let's say they draft a quarterback with their first overall pick, but they still have Teddy Bridgewater. I think what they do is they sit that quarterback for a year, let Teddy Bridgewater play out his contract, play out this year, groom that rookie quarterback, and then next year start fresh, right? Their defense last year, they spent all 7 of their draft picks on defense. So those guys will now get a full offseason of work, and I think their defense will be at least a little bit improved. And as far as the whole, Christian McCaffrey involved in a trade with Deshaun Watson, let me just clear this one out, because this is very simple for me. First of all, Deshaun Watson has a no trade clause in his contract. So if the Texans do eventually decide to get smart and trade him, Deshaun Watson can basically approve or deny wherever he wants to go. And why would Deshaun Watson ever go to the Carolina Panthers without Christian McCaffrey?
That's a good point.
It's not like Carolina
That's a good point.
is LA or New York or Chicago or New Orleans. Like, you were going to Carolina because of Christian McCaffrey. So if for some reason Christian McCaffrey was in a Texans deal, if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm just simply saying no, because I'm not going there to.
That's a very good point.
Weapons, right?
No, that's Jared. Yeah, Jared, that's a very good point, because when you actually look at this offense, besides the offensive line, which needs help, like, I think Carolina should absolutely put their money into fixing their offensive line. It was one of the worst last year, right? And so you look at Deshaun Watson. If he does have Christian McCaffrey, they have Robbie Anderson, who had a breakout year, clearly was being held back by the Jets, and they have DJ Moore. They have a solid tandem, and then the tight end, I believe it's Ian Thomas, solid tight end too. So offensive weapons wise, very, very good team, right? And then you add a quarterback in there, because they haven't really had a quarterback for the last 3 years. No disrespect to Teddy Bridgewater and Cam Newton, but those guys were average quarterbacks, and that those talented players need a better guy than that. And so, yeah, I do agree with you. I think if McCaffrey's in the deal, I think essentially that's not happening. And it might be hard for Carolina to get a guy. So I think they should go draft a quarterback, and they should shore up their offensive line in free agency and maybe draft a couple other defenders. And that's how they do it. Do I think this team is a Super Bowl contender or even a playoff team, even maybe with Deshaun Watson? Maybe even not, right? Like there's a lot of teams, but I do think by adding that franchise quarterback that they haven't had since 2016 and in the tip-top Cam Newton years, I think that puts the back burner on everybody saying rebuild, rebuild. Because I think if you can get a quarterback this year, whether it's Deshaun Watson or it's one of these guys this year in a solid quarterback draft, I think the Carolina Panthers on offense are solid. I think they are good. And then you start to rebuild that team a little bit, and it's a short rebuild. You have a good coach in Matt Rule. You have a great offensive coordinator in Joe Brady. Wow, the guy from LSU. A great year last year. If you actually look at the stats, with that talent and with Teddy Bridgewater, a lot of people were kind of saying if they just didn't have Teddy Bridgewater, they would have been a solid team. Like Teddy Bridgewater made them worse at quarterback, especially later in the season. And with Joe Brady's offense, that team got significantly better. It also helps when you don't have your quarterback throwing balls into the ground from 5 yards away, like Cam Newton was. So, I think this team has potential, but they just have to be smart. And I don't think you can go another year with Ted Bridgewater and not draft a quarterback. I think that'd be stupid. So everything else needs to be fixed, but quarterback obviously is the biggest problem. And then you look at Atlanta. Oh, man, this is the tough one. Because what do you do with Matt Ryan? What do you do with Julio Jones, right? I think it's almost like you either get rid of both or you keep both, right? Jones's contract is a little bit longer, so you can keep him around for longer. His major contract is just hit this year too. He was getting paid not that much the year before, and it went to like $20 million. I believe it's 19 and 19 for the next 2 years. So Julio Jones is on the hook. So maybe you get rid of him because you have Calvin Ridley. I don't know. This team needs everything fixed on defense too. They're probably going to lose Keanu Neal, who was a great defender for them. They still have Deion Jones, but they signed Dante Fowler Jr., who's a failure, 4 sacks last year. The one thing this team does, though, is they got Dean Pease as their new defensive coordinator. He has had, I believe, like top 12 defenses for the last number of years. Now, he was with the Patriots and other teams, but Dean Pease has been a great coach. Also, they add new head coach Arthur Smith, who was the OC the last 2 years in Tennessee. What do we know about Tennessee the last 2 years is they were one of the best offensive teams, right? Yeah, they had Derrick Henry, but he made Ryan Tannehill look like a Pro Bowl quarterback, right? So maybe we see the rejuvenation of Matt Ryan with this new, head coach in Arthur Smith. Maybe we see the defense play a little better because they have a good coach, or we see them completely rebuild. Jared, what do you think is going to happen?
Look, I don't really even know why we're talking about. Atlanta sucks. They're not good. Okay, they need everything under the sun on defense. I don't care what defensive coordinator they bring in. Just listen. They have Grady Jarrett, a great defensive tackle, and Deion Jones. That is it. They need 9 other players on defense, right? So you can spend all your draft picks on defense and all your free agency money on defense, but they need defense, and even more defense. Offensively, you're right. I think they keep Matt Ryan. I think they keep Julio Jones to pair with Calvin Ridley, one of the best wide receiver tandems in the league. Right, but they don't have a good offensive line, and they don't really have a good running game, right? Obviously, when they, sorry, I'm blanking right now, but when they when they got Todd Gurley, right, he has been a shell of himself so far. So yes, bringing in Arthur Smith, who is very much more, pro-run, pro-heavy, maybe they can get a little bit better there. But this team is not competitive. They are not. I'm not even going to say Super Bowl because they're not even playoff contenders to me. They need a lot of help. I think Atlanta actually, with their first overall pick in the draft this year, I think they take a quarterback. No, even though Matt Ryan is going to be there for this year and potentially next year, I still think if they feel that a guy could be their franchise for the future, let him sit for a year or two, whether it's a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, and learn from the likes of a Matt Ryan who's been to the Super Bowl before, right? And then in a year or two, take over. So if Atlanta is really building, for their future, I think they go quarterback first, let him sit and learn under Matt Ryan and go from there. But Atlanta needs so much help that, listen, this is going to be a rebuild for a couple years. No other way to put
Yeah,
it.
I'll say this. I mean, I agree with you. I think they should rebuild, and there's an easy way to do this. They have number 4 draft pick, so this is good. They're going to get a top 3 quarterback in the draft, which is going to be somebody that's good. It's going to be Lance, Lawrence if they trade up for him for some reason, which I don't think is going to happen, or Justin Fields, right? And so what they actually need to do is that they're $30 million over the cap right now, so they need to release some guys, and that's why Keanu Neal can't come back and stuff like that. Simply restructuring Matt Ryan's contract actually saves them $14 million a year. So they don't need to release Matt Ryan to save money. I think they restructure Matt Ryan's contract. They keep him there at whether it's a backup role or it's the starter, like you said, to keep him behind, either keep him in front or behind a young quarterback to teach him. I think you get rid of Julio Jones, get value there. You move back in the draft. Well, actually, no, not move back in the draft. Draft a quarterback at number 4, excuse me, and you restart, right? I agree. I think this is going to be a rebuilding year. I think they're going to be the worst team in the NFC South again, and hopefully we just see some promise because I want to see Calvin Ridley succeed. I want to see that Falcons team, man, that Super Bowl that one year where they blew it.
They're still having nightmares. They're still having nightmares. 28-3.
All right, we need to move on to the AFC West. We're going long on this podcast. This is a big time podcast today. We got a lot of NFL news, and we want to get to the AFC West here. So again, Kansas City recap in the link below. Not going to extend on that too much more. It was in the Super Bowl recap. Go check that out right now if you care about the Chiefs. Let's start with the Broncos. Okay, this team, an interesting roster because I'll say this, Jared. They lost Von Miller at the beginning of the season last year. Their defense actually kind of overperformed last year, kind of like I said in the preview. Defense did succeed. Justin Simmons was a monster last year. They need to re-sign him. The D-line should be a bit healthier if they don't get rid of Von Miller. And then you also have Cortland Sutton coming back from a torn ACL, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, and Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon as well, back likely. Here's the problem with this team, Drew Lock. And a lot of people point to Drew Lock being the sole reason this Denver team did not progress last year, and the sole reason why guys like Jerry Jeudy didn't have good years. And yeah, Cortland Sutton does hurt, but this team had a solid offensive line. Like, it wasn't the greatest offensive line, but it wasn't a bad one. They have one of the best left tackles in the league in Garrett Bowles. And so I think it's simple this year, Jared. The Broncos need to make a decision. Do you think Drew Lock is your franchise quarterback, which a lot of people don't think he is, or do you go draft a quarterback with number 9? I think they should draft a quarterback because I say go with the Cardinals route. Drew Lock does not seem – when you regress your second year, you're screwed in the NFL now. And I think this guy did not get better. He was one of the reasons this team was bad. And when you have Sutton, Jeudy, Hamler, Fant, and then maybe even Melvin Gordon, that's good offense, right? And a solid offensive line. So I think they get rid of Drew Lock and draft a quarterback, or maybe just trade for Deshaun Watson. We know Deshaun Watson's been in the rumors there. I don't want to say Deshaun Watson for every single team, but, potentially there's a spot there too, in Denver, Deshaun Watson. What do you think? I think the sole problem with this team is Drew Lock. What do you think about that?
No lies there. And I'll say it. Every team, unless you are the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, should be wanting to trade for Deshaun Watson. Like, Deshaun Watson is that great of a player. And the fact that he is so young, like I believe he's only 24. You do not see 24-year-old quarterbacks with his caliber of talent who hit the market, right? And it's not like he's a free agent and he can choose wherever you want to go. But if you have an opportunity to get one of those guys, you have to pull the trigger, right? Like you mentioned, the Broncos have the number 9 overall pick. And so I think they use that package with other future draft picks and potentially a player as well. And you offer it to Houston and you say, let's work out a deal. If for some reason that doesn't happen, then I think they should actually trade up in the draft because they are at number 9 and it wouldn't be that big of a jump to go up to number 3 or something like that and get one of these quarterbacks. Because I think at number 9, Lawrence will be gone, right? I believe that Wilson will be gone and Fields. So now you're potentially looking at maybe a Trey Lance, right? Or
Mac Jones.
If you really like a Mac Jones, but I think that's a little high for him. So I think this Denver team, you're right. I'll give them 3 positions where they need to upgrade. If this Denver team upgrades 3 positions, I think they're playoff contenders: quarterback, linebacker, and secondary. Mainly at cornerback.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
They have very good and just young, talented weapons at tight end and wide receiver and at the running back spot, right? And then on defense, you're right. You get Von Miller back, one of the best defensive end pass rushers in the game still, right? You've got the likes of Bradley Chubb on the other side, DeMarcus Walker, DeMonte Jones. So they have some good pieces up front.
Yeah.
But it's the linebacker and the secondary, specifically the corners, that need help, and the quarterback position. I think if they do those 3 things through free agency and the draft, this team is contending for the playoffs.
I'll say this too, like with you're talking about the quarterbacks and you're thinking that like Mac Jones isn't enough. You know what Drew Lock is though, and you know he's not that great of a quarterback, so might as well just go try it out with Mac Jones for 1 year, right? Go see what you can do. Like, I know rookie contracts are complicated and you might owe guys money later and stuff like that, but like, I don't know. And I know the quarterback drafting, I'll tell you this, for the Broncos has not been good for a while now, right? Like, they had Tim Tebow at quarterback. They had Osweiler. God, who were the other guys? Patton, whatever his name was, right? Like, so many bad quarterback choices. Maybe you do just trade for an established guy, whether it's Derek Carr or someone like just someone normal, right? Just to have a QB, right? And they had Peyton Manning the 1 year, but obviously that was an anomaly. And I think if they don't have that unbelievable defense, they don't even sniff the Super Bowl, right? So this team needs to figure out their quarterback situation, and I say might as well just keep trying until you figure it out, right? Like don't stick with Drew Lock and make everybody else worse on that team and make your franchise, worse and make people not want to play with you and stuff like that, because, you have the last few years of Von Miller here, and if you want him to become J.J. Watt, he can, and he can go to a different team. But if you want to use him for the skills that he has, which are still a very above average and Pro Bowl-like, I think you need to really figure out your quarterback position. And whether that's Deshaun Watson, whether that's a quarterback this year, I think they need to move off of Drew Lock. All right, I just mentioned Derek Carr. Let's go to the Raiders, right? This is a team I'm very disappointed in, Jared, because you had John Gruden sign the contract 2 years ago. And last year, right, they beat the Chiefs last year, right, in Kansas City. They get close. They play them a real close game in Las Vegas on Sunday Night Football. And then from there, just dropped off the face of the earth and didn't make the playoffs. They had every chance to make the playoffs. And it just seems like this team is like running on neutral, sort of, with Derek Carr and the rest of this team. I know they were missing a lot of offensive line last year. Like, they missed Trent Brown for most of the year. They were missing Richie Incognito. I think he only played like 2 games for them, something like that. And obviously offensively, they were like Josh Jacobs missed a bunch of games. So there was reasons why they didn't play good. But I think the biggest problem on this team is their defense. Like, holy crap. When you look at this defense, you understand why this team didn't make the playoffs. This defense is bad. Like, we're talking about the defenses like Atlanta and Carolina already. This might be worse than those two. And because they're so good on offense, or not, because they have offensive talent, they have Darren Waller, they have Derek Carr, they have John Gruden. I think this team is serviceable, and they were able to get close, but they need to fix like everything on this defense. There's not one bright spot on this defense, and that's a problem. And I don't know how this team makes the playoffs this year unless they really go out like in free agency and in the draft and get lucky like the Saints did that 1 year. This team is just dead in the water to me. They already lose Nelson Aguilar. Henry Ruggs sucked. This team is, with John Gruden, he's strapped in for 7 more years. If I'm a Las Vegas Raiders fan, I'm getting Golden Knights season tickets. I'm not getting Raiders season tickets.
Listen, I'm glad you brought up the Chiefs, because that was the one highlight of this Raiders season, right? They start off 6-3. They beat Kansas City in Kansas City, like you mentioned, and then they're 6-3, and Kansas City comes to Las Vegas. It's actually a very competitive game. I believe it was 35-31.
Very good
Kansas City ended up pulling it out at the end. After that game, I think that literally deflated this Raiders team, and they took a nosedive. They lose to Atlanta the next week, right? The week after they lose to Kansas City in a very close matchup. Lose to Atlanta, who was not a good team. They're a very bad team. So that was an upset. And then they go to New York to play the Jets. And the only reason they beat the Jets is because the Jets and their defensive coordinator do an all-out blitz, and Henry Ruggs is able to be one-on-one with the corner, and they literally get like a last-second Hail Mary touchdown, right? That is the only reason why they beat the Jets. So they lost to the Falcons, should have lost to the Jets. Then they lose to the Colts, the Chargers, and the Dolphins. They finished their season by beating the Broncos, but at that point, who the hell really cares, right? So it's like they start off really well, and then because of injuries and other things, they just literally completely fell off. And like you mentioned, I don't know if I can name a defender on this Raiders defense. Like I really don't know if is Max Crosby one of their defensive ends? He's a solid player, right?
Max Crosby, right? Here's the thing. He actually had I think he had 7 or 8 sacks, but I read that his snap count, his snap count, that's bad. That's not good for a guy that played as much as he did to only have 7 or 8 sacks. I'll say this, Jared. Here's the interesting stat for you. They've had 9 top 100 picks over the last 2 drafts. These are the guys: Tanner Muse, Brian Edwards, Lynn Bowden Jr., Damon Arnett, Ruggs, Trayvon Mullen, Jonathan Abram, Josh Jacobs, and Cleveland Farrell. Are any of those guys besides Jacobs, who's kind of a fantasy darling, more or less? Do you even know half those guys? I don't.
So I mean, listen, Tanner Muse, if I'm not mistaken, was from Clemson. I think he was a safety, but he's more of a situational guy, not in every down. Jonathan Abram, the safety out of Mississippi State, that was the year when he got drafted when the Raiders were on Hard Knocks. So he kind of made a name for himself there, and he actually is a really good safety, but he's had the injury bug 2 years so far, so he hasn't been able to stay healthy.
The problem with him too is because of the rest of that defense being bad, he's not a coverage guy. So we know him. He's a big hitter, right? He's like the DJ Swearinger type, the Cam Chancellor, right? So that's not his role. Is not to be like a great coverage safety. And they just brought in Gus Bradley, who's going to play cover 3, so that will help him defensively. But Abrams is one of the worst coverage safeties. So because the rest of that defense has been so bad, a guy like Abrams that should be able to just fit his niche and be a star as a big hitter and a good tackler isn't able to do that because he's told to do more things aren't his strengths. And teams just take advantage of his weakness over and over again because all the corners suck and the other safety sucks too. So yeah, that's a bright spot. But again, it's because the rest of that defense is so bad. Everyone else has to go above and beyond, and these guys aren't good enough to go above and beyond. So although I like Jonathan Abram, and because he's been injury prone, he's not able to do what people want him to do, right? So I just think if the Raiders don't fix this defense, they have no chance at anything next year. No chance. They're going to lose twice to the Chiefs, and the Chargers and Broncos will probably be better next year too. The Raiders could be the worst team in the AFC West. All right, let's get to the Chargers to finish off this podcast. Obviously, Justin Herbert, right? The bright spot maybe of, besides Patrick Mahomes, maybe one of the bright spots of the AFC at quarterback, right? Future guy. Everyone thinks this guy is the man. And on a bad team last year in the Chargers was a very excellent quarterback. Besides that, their offensive line is very unknown. I believe there's 4 players that are either going to become free agents or 4 starters are going to become free agents or could be cut based on money and stuff like that. They need corners to replace Chris Harris and Casey Hayward, who are probably going to leave, and they need to re-sign Hunter Henry. But Jared, in your opinion, besides those 2 things, the offensive line and the corner position, what else does this Chargers team need to do? Because I didn't think this team was that bad last year, and they ended up really having a bad record. This team kind of confuses me every year. They have a new head coach in Brandon Staley, who interestingly will now run the Rams defense that was #1 in the NFL, and will actually, with their personnel, will help the Chargers defense be just a bit better just based on their personnel. But what was the problem with this team last year, and how did they get better? Like, why was this team so bad last year?
Yeah, here's the main problem. They didn't know how to finish, right? And I'm going to give you a couple examples of that, right? Week 1, or actually, no, they won that game. I'm sorry. Week 2, they lose to the Chiefs 23-20. Week 3, they lose to the Panthers 21-16. Week 4, they lose to the Bucs 38-31. Week 5, they lose to the Saints 30-27. They lose to the Broncos 31-30. They lose to the Raiders 31-26. Let's see. You know what I mean? Like, so very close games. They don't know how to finish and or final drives go down and score and get a field goal, right? So they're kind of right there, and it's not like they need to rebuild or any of that stuff. They do need to retool at some positions, but you're right. Justin Herbert is the bright spot, was the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, right? You still got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams as receiving threats. I definitely think they need to try to bring back Hunter Henry. He might cost a little more than they want, but him to go along with those receivers that I just mentioned, I think that is a very solid offensive weapon core for Justin Herbert to work with. So from an offensive standpoint, yes, they are going to have major questions on the offensive line. But if they can draft well off the offensive line, maybe get one guy in free agency, right? And then if they can shore up that secondary, this is actually a good team. I would argue that, you know, they're not on the Chiefs level, obviously, but this team could contend as being the second best team in the AFC West. You've got Joey Bosa on defense, right? Melvin Ingram, Kenneth Murray, who was their first overall draft pick last year, who's kind of in and out. So they have some pieces to work around. And Derwin James, who's one of the best safeties in the league, but unfortunately last year in training camp, he got injured as well. So a lot of solid pieces for this Chargers team to work around. It's just they need to be able to put it all together. Because like I mentioned, you can be in games, but if you can't finish a game, you're going to end up like the Chargers. So they've got to learn how to finish. I think that's the #1 issue with this team.
Yeah, no, and that's been a problem with this team for years, right? Like they missing field goals and even the, you know, like they had the one year they were great and then got pounded by the Patriots in the playoffs. But like this team just, you know, and maybe it was Anthony Lynn, right? Maybe he just wasn't that kind of coach that got the players to get up for the end of a game and stuff like that. But you look at it, they ended up 7-9, right? They could have been a lot better, right? The AFC would have been hard to make the playoffs because everybody was 11-5 essentially making the playoffs. So it would have been tough to, you know, win another 4 games or whatever. I'm not going to say they would have won 11-5, but you know, this team would have been well on the future of this year. We're saying easily make the playoffs. But I think if they don't help that offensive line and they don't get a corner or something like that, and you know, and they don't re-sign Hunter Henry, they could just be another average team, right? You know, they have Derwin James, they have Joey Bosa. They do lose Melvin Ingram Jr., so that will hurt. But you know, they drafted Kenneth Murray, and they have like everybody's always you're gonna lose somebody every year, right? Like if the Cardinals lose Patrick Peterson, we gain J.J. Watt, right? Like the good teams figure out a way to sign a guy when they lose a guy, right? So can the Chargers be one of those teams? I don't know. But they have the future quarterback, and they have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams at least there for one more year. You sign Hunter Henry, and then you have Austin Eckler and Hunter Henry, like you mentioned, on offense. You fix up the offensive line, right? And this team, you know, could be a playoff team. But, you know, and then you have Brandon Staley, who's a defensive coach, right? #1 defense. That defense will likely improve. So it's looking up for the Chargers. Am I going to say they make it the playoffs? I don't know, because I just need to see what they do in the offseason. That's why we're not predicting playoffs or anything with these previews. We'll do that in our full NFL predictions after we see free agency and stuff like that. But we just wanted to give you guys a little end of the season for all these teams. But yeah, I think the Chargers can easily be the #2 team. And if the Broncos and Chargers do some interesting things this offseason, I think this AFC West could be really competitive. It could be a little bit more difficult for the Chiefs, right? Because I think last year they just cruised on by. And for some reason, they struggled with the Raiders. But, you know, they could have been 16-0. Like, looking at the Chiefs, they could be 16-0 if this division doesn't help. I'm just saying. Like, that's how good this team is. The Chiefs are.
Not out of the question.
Yeah, again, so, you know, if you want to see Tampa Bay and the Chiefs, like we said, go to the other podcast, the Super Bowl recap. It's in the link below. If you want to go back or you jump forward, you see all the time codes, you know where to go. right? But this is going to be the end of this podcast. We're a little long today, but you know what? That's what happens when you got big news, right? We got to get these done before free agency starts too, right? Well, we're going to be starting to do other teams like when free agency gets out. So expect next week for us to do at least another division. We are not going to tell you which one that is because we want to see if there's a trade or something like that, right? You see Deshaun Watson getting traded. You know, we're not going to sit here and do a team that we're not going to say, oh, we're going to do the AFC North next week, and then he gets traded to Cleveland or so. You know, like that's not realistic. But like, so maybe Jared, we can do a division we know Deshaun Watson's not going to go to. Maybe we'll do that. But so next week we'll have at least one division, maybe two that we'll do based on time constraints. We're not going to make these podcasts 2 hours long. We'll try to keep it, you know, around this 120 mark if we can to get these NFL, these NFL previews and overviews done. But for this podcast, we are done. Jared, again, the Cardinals got J.J. Watt. Just want to remember that to begin the podcast. And we hope for the best for Tiger Woods. But to end this podcast, I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Coverage 2 Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.